Welcome dear students to another part of our class, standard 10th, subject social science. Today we will learn about natural resources. First we have to learn what is a resource, that you have learned in the lower classes and all. The nature is fully made up of different elements. All these elements are for the use of men, but we are not using all these elements. All these elements can be called resources when we use them and when our needs or wants are satisfied with that. So what is a resource means, whenever an element we use to satisfy our needs, then that comes as a resource. We know that here natural resources, when we say, mean what all things are there in the nature, everything comes in the natural resource, but when we use them to satisfy our wants, that comes as a resource. If the elements that comes from the nature, then it is told as a natural resources. Natural resources have virtues of utility and capability. These natural resources have a utility means use and capability. Natural resources have a utility and capability. Then according to the capability of that resources, we use to satisfy our needs. So resources are very important, especially natural resources. All our requirements are satisfied with these natural resources. Earlier, the early men were not knowing about the different uses of these resources and all, but that time that was not known as a resource, because he was not knowing about that one. But later, by using the technology or with the use of our intelligence and skill, man changed this into different ways and all, and later it satisfied the needs of the man. So that way we can see examples of land, water and different things we use have a different or multiple uses and all. So anything that comes to satisfy our wants is known as a resource. Then we see what are the different uses of resource. Mainly resources are used for food. It is used as food, then as a raw material. Resources are used as a raw material and as also energy resources. Energy resources. The main use of these resources is food. All our food requirements are satisfied with these resources. We know that fruits, vegetables and all the agriculture items or farming, after doing farming, what all things we get as a food, that comes from nature. And again that milk, meat and all we get from animals. So different things what we get as a food by nature comes as a resource. Then second, raw materials. Raw materials for many agro products are made by using the raw material from the nature, that forest products and agro products. Again, wools, hide, meat available from animals, mineral ores, etc. form the raw materials for industries. And third, as energy resources, mainly use of coal, petroleum, natural gas, etc. as a fuel in industries as well as domestic field. And besides this, energy can be generated through solar insolation, wind, sea waves, tides, ebbs and waterfalls, etc. All these are the part of nature, and it is also called natural resources. So mainly natural resources we use as a food, raw material and energy resources. Next we will see the types of resources. Different types of resources can be seen. So resources can be classified according to their ownership, according to their re-availability and distribution. and distribution. So ownership, first we take the type of resource as ownership. So through that we can see there are individual ownership, that means one individual or family is owned that resource. Example we can say land and buildings. Second is a national resource owned by the country or a region, that is army, international trade and all comes in the national resource. And third is a global resource, all physical and non-physical resource which are used for human welfare, that comes in the global resource. Resources are common ownership of all nations of the world, so that comes as a global ownership. So according to the ownership we can see the individual, then national and global. So these are the three resources under the ownership. And next we see the re-availability of the resources. There we can see that renewable and non-renewable resources, renewable and non-renewable. We know that many resources are there. Some resources when we use that finishes that resources or that exhaust, we cannot reproduce them within a stipulated time. That resources are called non-renewable resources. Some resources, even though we use it more also, that may not exhaust, that is known as a renewable. So within a period of time we can regenerate them, that is renewable. So according to the availability we can see renewable and non-renewable resources. And according to the distribution we can see universal resources is universal resources, that means useful gases in the atmosphere like oxygen, nitrogen and all, that everybody need and everywhere it has to be there, so that is a universal. Then generally available resources, generally available resources, that is easily available, that our land, soil, water and all comes in that. Then next is rare resources, that is limited resources, then everywhere it is not present, only in the limited places we can see, that is minerals like coal, petroleum, copper, gold, etc. Then solitary resources, next is solitary resources, that is minerals available only at one or two places in the world, so that is cryolite. Example is given, cryolite, which is available only in Greenland. So according to the types of resources, we have seen three types of resources by ownership, re-availability and distribution. Under ownership, individual, national and global ownership. Re-availability, renewable and non-renewable resources. According to distribution, universal resource, general resource, rare and solitary resource. So we know that resources are there in the nature, but these are unevenly distributed everywhere. Means all resources we cannot see in one place. It is unevenly distributed, and we don't know the availability of the these resources also, and without these resources we cannot live also. So then comes what? Planning and conservation of resources. If we use the resources without any planning, that will exhaust from the nature and the future generation won't get it, that resources. So we must not be that much selfish to use that one. We have to think about the future generation also. So all the resources, especially the non-renewable resources, we have to use considerably or judiciously. For that we need a planning of resources. So we see that what are the different plannings we have to take. First of all, gather about the availability of utilized, unutilized and probable resources of any region or a country as a unit. So first we have to get the information about availability of the utilized resources, whether this resource is available again and again. Then unutilized resources and probable resource, whose sectile means that resources also have to be get information. Second one, resources which are limited or non-renewable, they should be exploited scientifically. Non-renewable resources we have to use scientifically and should be used only where it is necessary to use them, or once it finished we cannot regenerate them. Third one, attempts should be made to develop those resources, the quantity of which can be increased. So again we have to work hard to increase the availability of the resources, quantity of that resources. Then resources which are cheaper and are easily available should not be wasted, but instead they should be used sparingly for future use. Means they should be used in a small quantity considering the future generation also. And the next is, these resources which are in limited quantity should be conserved, finding its alternative option through technical development is favorable. So new techniques we have to be developed to consume or to conserve that resources which are in limited quantity. Then for that necessary laws should be formed for the conservation of resources and should be enforced strictly. Last one, citizens should be acquainted with all facts associated with the rational usage of resources, and a public awareness should be cultivated. For the conservation, first and foremost thing is the public awareness. So many things we are doing because we are not knowing about that resource only. So awareness of the resources, availability of the resources, what happens when we use them more, that and all knowledge we must know. So we must have. So citizens should be aware of all these factors associated with the rational usage of these resources. So while planning we have to keep these all things in our mind, then only we can plan it and use the resources. The next comes soil. Soil is an important resource. And soil, what is soil? Soil is the upper layer of the earth's crust, where the plants live. So soil is the upper crust of the earth's surface. And because of the denudation of rocks only, this soil happens. For the denudation or the breaking of the rocks, some features or some material, some things are needed, that is temperature. We can see temperature, wind, water, humidity, etc. are the important factors that led to the denudation of rocks. So when the rocks break out, it have only the minerals. Later when the biotic elements mix with that, we get the soil. So soil is a natural mixture of minerals and biotic elements which have the capacity to grow and develop vegetation. It's a mixture of minerals. In the early formation only minerals will be there. Later biotic components will added into that and form the soil suitable for the vegetation. And climate plays an important role. Climate and time plays an important role to form the soil. According to the ICAR, that means Indian Council of Agricultural Research, the soil is divided into 8 types. 8 types of soil can be used or can be seen here. That is alluvial soil, red soil, black soil, laterite soil, desert soil, mountain soil, forest soil, marshy and peat soil. So these are the different types of soil we find on the earth. So that we will learn in the next class. Today I conclude with this. This is the end of our session today. We shall continue with our subject on next part of our class. Okay.